will be available at a later point on the webinars webpage, ctstate.edu/webinars. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to David DiMattio, the Dean for the School of Science and Mathematics.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. I hope that you find it informative. So today we will be talking, as the title infers, the IRB process here at CT State. And as we are now in a collective 12 campus entity, we hope to be demonstrating how the consolidation has impacted IRB. As you heard today, I am Dr. David DiMattio. I am currently the Dean of the School of Science and Mathematics for the Consolidated CT State. And joining us as well today for the presentation is my co-chairperson to the IRB committee, Ms. Sohair Omar. Sohair is the Campus Director of Institutional Research at Naugatuck Valley. So today, we plan to be introducing you briefly to a few of our topics. What exactly is the purpose of an institutional review board? What exactly do we mean by human subjects? How several of you will be falling into what may be an exempt research status, and we'll try to explain that to you. When the IRB then in fact is review process is in fact required. And then how we as a consolidated CT state, we dealt with the background, the membership, how in fact the application process and other documents will be used moving forward, and exactly our due dates and contact information. And at the end of this presentation, we will allow for some Q&A if you have them. So I'll start by just briefly defining what is the purpose of the IRB. So IRB, or institutional review boards, review research studies to ensure that, again, that they comply with applicable regulations at the federal level, that we can meet commonly accepted ethical standards, considering that most of the IRB research deals with human subjects. We want to follow institutional policies and protect research participants at the same time. So I'll invite Sohair now to talk a little bit.
Thank you, Dean DiMattio. Specifically, IRB reviews help to ensure that human subjects are protected from research-related risks and treated ethically, a necessary prerequisite for maintaining the public's trust in the institution. So the first question that you want to ask yourself is, does the research involve human subjects? A human subject is a living individual about whom an investigator conducting research obtains data through intervention or interaction or identifiable private information. To reiterate, one of the purposes of the IRB review is to ensure that appropriate steps are taken to protect the rights and the welfare of humans participating as subjects in the research. Next. Federal regulations require that IRBs give special consideration to protecting the welfare of particularly vulnerable human subjects, including children, economically disadvantaged persons, human fetuses, individuals with mental disabilities or cognitive impairments, individuals with physical disabilities, institutionalized persons, for example, persons in nursing homes or mental health facilities, neonates, pregnant women, prisoners, racial or ethnic minorities, socially disadvantaged persons, and terminally ill or very sick patients. Next. Unless otherwise required by law, research activities in which the only involvement of human subjects will be in one or more of the following categories are exempt from a full IRB review. Number 1, research conducted in established or commonly accepted educational settings that specifically involves normal educational practices that are not likely to adversely impact students' opportunity to learn required educational content or the assessment of educators who provide instruction. This includes most research on regular or special education instructional strategies and research on the effectiveness of or the comparison among instructional techniques, curricula, or classroom management methods. Number 2, research that only includes involving educational tests, including cognitive, diagnostic, aptitude and achievement, survey procedures, interview procedures, or observation of public behavior, including visual or auditory recording, if at least one of the following criteria is met. The information obtained is recorded by the investigator in such a manner that the identity of the human subjects cannot readily be ascertained directly or through identifiers linked to the subjects, and/or any disclosure of the human subject's responses outside the research would not reasonably place the subjects at risk of criminal or civil liability or be damaging to the subject's financial standing, employability, educational advancement, or reputation. Number 3, research involving benign behavioral interventions in conjunction with the collection of information from an adult subject through verbal or written responses, including data entry or audiovisual recording, if the subject prospectively agrees to the intervention and information collection. Benign behavioral interventions are brief in duration, harmless, painless, not physically invasive, not likely to have a significant adverse lasting impact on the subjects, and the investigator has no reason to think that the subjects will find the interventions offensive or embarrassing. Examples of benign behavioral interventions include having the subjects play an online game or having them solve puzzles under various noise conditions. Number 4, research using existing data that is publicly available or recorded without identifiers. Number 5, research or demonstration projects that are supported and conducted by a federal department or agency and that are designed to study, evaluate, improve, or examine public benefit or service programs. Number 6, taste and food quality evaluation and consumer acceptance studies. And lastly, categories 7 and 8 are certain secondary research for which broad consent is required. This is mostly concerning biospecimens. Next. This chart shows the 18 federal departments and agencies that have adopted the 2018 Common Rule, also known as the Federal Policy for Protecting Human Subjects of Research. The Food and Drug Administration, or FDA, is boxed because it has additional IRB requirements, mostly concerning human testing and biomedical research. Next. So when is IRB review required? Certain guidelines include, number 1, the research uses non-public information to identify or contact human research participants or prospective participants. Number 2, the research uses as human subjects CT State students, faculty, or staff. Number 3, the research collects data which will result in an article, master's thesis, doctoral dissertation, poster session, abstract, or any other publication, presentation, or any dissemination. To help decide if an activity is research involving human subjects that must be reviewed by an IRB, use the Human Subject Regulation Decision Charts available on the HHS website. It is important to note that all human research conducted at CT State must be carried out under the supervision of a CT State faculty or staff member and have the approval of the IRB. Researchers from other institutions seeking to conduct research at CT State must collaborate with a CT State employee who will ensure that the research is conducted in accordance with the approval conditions of the CT State IRB. And now I will turn it back to you, Dean DiMattio.
Thank you, Sohair. So a little bit of the background that brought us to this point with the consolidation, the CT State IRB. So beginning this year, in late spring semester of 2023, we at the district level began to develop the CT State IRB policies, procedures, and membership based on feedback and recommendations from several stakeholders. So what we did then in the initial stages were that there was a smaller subcommittee of individuals, including myself, Dr. David DiMattio, Sohair Omar, who's on this call, and Carrie Pickford, who is a professor at our Tunxus campus, and we comprised the initial review committee that started this initiative in early spring. As you can see here, we relied on recommendations and feedback from multiple stakeholders. The legacy IRBs that came with each of the now campuses, we relied on feedback from those individual stakeholders. We worked with our CT State Senate, having presented at least twice to the Senate in terms of feedback and overview of our progress. We had relied on the CT State Institutional Effectiveness and Planning Committee, and we talked with the IR directors at each of our campuses for feedback and, again, insights as to what will be accordingly for the future of the IRB consolidated effort. And then, of course, we worked with the CT State academic deans, the school deans, if you will, who represent the 6 core areas of academics at the newly formatted CT State. So over the summer, we did finally apply and received notification from the OHRP, which is the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Office for Human Research Protections, or as the acronym states, the OHRP. And we received acceptance by the federal government, and our ID number is as follows. This registration is listed on their website, and as funding agencies use this website to verify that there is in fact an IRB with an active registration. CT State IRB complies with all federal regulations and adopts multiple best practices. As Sohair has mentioned to you earlier, the federal regulations 45 CFR 46, which deals with protection of human subjects, refers ultimately to what we call the common rule. The common rule is this anchor of regulatory text on which investigators and IRBs rely and must comply to protect human subjects in research. That is one of the best practices that we relied heavily on. In addition, we worked with our partner institutions surrounding us in the greater Connecticut area, the University of Connecticut or UConn IRB, as well as research, as well as information that comes from our Human Research Protection Program or HRPP. In addition, we relied on our partners at the state level for the Connecticut State University IRBs as reference. And from that, we gleaned multiple best practices that we try to incorporate into our consolidated effort. The CT State IRB membership is based upon the common rule, which requires at least 5 members of varying backgrounds are invited to participate. At minimum, the membership must include someone who provides a perspective as a scientist, someone who provides a perspective as a non-scientist, and someone who is not affiliated with the research institution. In addition, the common rule requests that we make every non-discriminatory effort to ensure that the membership is composed and is not composed entirely of men and women, and that there is a diverse representation. In our current membership, we have the following individuals from across our statewide system. Professor Michael Amico, Professor Parth Desari, who is from Goodwin University, Professor Diaz, myself, David DiMattio, Sohair Omar, who is on this call, Professor Francine Roselli Navarra, Dr. Joshua Searcy, who is the Dean of the Social and Behavioral School, and Dr. Meredith Uhas, who is our Director of Mental Health and Wellness for the CT State. I will now invite Sohair to talk a little bit more about the forms and process itself.
So to date, we have developed the following CT State IRB forms and templates in bold, including the application, the CT State employees conducting research for external purposes form, the adult informed consent form template, the request for additional information letter, and the approval letter. We are currently in the process of developing an application for exempt or limited IRB review, an application for certain research courses, a human subjects research determination form, a data security assessment form, a parent permission form template, an assent form for minor participants template, and a disapproval letter. Next. Did the slides freeze?
Yeah, they froze.
So while we wait for, oh, there we go. So specifically, the CT State IRB application includes 22 questions, the major categories of which include the contact information of the principal investigator or PI and faculty advisor, the National Institutes of Health Protecting Human Research Participants HHS or other comparable training of the 2018 Common Rule, the title, introduction, and purpose of the research study, including the nexus between the research study and the mission of CT State, any sources of funding, the design, procedures, materials, and methods, including any inclusion or exclusion criteria. And we also ask the researcher to address reliability and validity in their research. Privacy and confidentiality, that is, how will the data be collected, stored, analyzed, retained, and eventually destroyed? Informed consent, which I will address in detail shortly. And lastly, conflict of interest, which specifically asks to disclose any personal, business, or volunteer affiliations or supervisor-supervisee relationships that may give rise to an actual, perceived, or potential conflict of interest. Next. For research courses, instead of having every student apply to the IRB, the faculty of that research course can submit an umbrella application so long as every student completes the National Institutes of Health Protecting Human Research Participants, HHS, or other comparable training. And the umbrella projects meet the regulatory definition of minimal risk human subject research, not have any federal funding sources, not involve FDA regulated products, not require parent permission for children as subjects, not target pregnant women, and not involve any prisoners. The faculty of that research course will be the principal investigator and ultimately responsible for all the umbrella projects. And they have to ensure that the protection of human subjects is intact for the purpose of compliance with federal regulations and CT State policies. Next. Informed consent. So we have developed a template which includes title, introduction, and the purpose of the research study, the procedures, that is, what will the participant be asked to do, the description of any potential risks, discomfort, or inconvenience, and if applicable, a list of relevant helplines. And here's an example. Privacy and confidentiality, that is, how will data be stored securely and how will confidentiality be maintained? And then lastly, voluntary participation. We have to make sure that they know that they have the right to decline and the right to stop participating at any time of the research. Along the lines of ethics in research, we have developed a statement in consultation with the CSCU Council in order to level the playing field where the CT state employee agrees not to access student or employee information maintained within any CSCU information system, including but not limited to Banner, for the purpose of conducting their external research project, which is unrelated to their duties as a college official. Further, they agree not to seek out additional information from any CSCU information system about any student or attempt to re-identify any individual involved in their external research study. So Dean DiMattio, I'll turn it back to you for important dates.
Thank you, Sohair. So as you can see here, the CT State IRB is in the process of accepting applications and meeting on a regular basis. We have set the following for applications for the fall semester, September 30th, and for our spring semester, February 15th of each year. Since we are in fact in a launch stage, if there are individual needs that sort of work outside of these time frames, I ask you to reach out directly to us, and we will take each request into consideration. However, we do recognize that many internal researchers may in fact require IRB certification for grant proposals in particular. But again, recognize that since we are in fact in a launch stage, that if you do have a need, please reach out to us directly and we can see about what we can do. Because again, the meeting schedule for the IRB committee itself pivots around the second Thursday of October and November during the fall semesters, and the second Thursday during March and April for the spring semesters. And as we can see here, the CT State IRB does have its own website. Please refer to that link going forward with dealing with the IRB, ctstate.edu/IRB. And in that, you can find the information that we shared with you today, including the policies and procedures, the forms and templates that Sohair has walked you through, and other FAQs that may be applied to your situation. We do have a common email box as well that I urge you to work with as well, ctstate-irb@ct.edu. Please include in the subject title of your research studies so that we will be able to catalog your requests accordingly. So just to summarize what exactly has been happening and has brought us to this particular state and time, we have been working with the local IRBs that were in process up until July 1st before the consolidation. And we've assembled a list of IRB decisions that included both exemptions, approvals, and disapprovals for the 12 campuses over the last 5 years. And CT State IRB will in fact honor and uphold them. We had recruited through the schools the initial CT State IRB membership and conducted our training for those members according to the NIH, the PHRP, and the HSS training requirements. We have, in fact, registered the CT State IRB, as I mentioned to you earlier, with our ID number that you can find earlier in this presentation. And we are up and running. CT State IRB is, in fact, accepting applications for the future. So again, we urge you to refer to the website initially and work with us so that we can work to move for your requests in a timely fashion. And so with that, I am going to pause us and take some questions.
Sure. So just a few came in. The first one is, does CT State have any plans that you know of to address NSF's requirement that all persons whose time is charged to an NSF award receive training in research integrity?
So
Let me put that where you can see it also, in case it's, I'm just gonna pop that into the chat too so people can see it.
So I can just start to address that. We do require all the applicants to complete the free training on the HHS website for human research protection. And we can look more into the NSF requirements regarding research and integrity, if that is related to the human research protection training or separate and apart from. So we'd be happy to look into that.
agreed. I'd like to know more about the definition of what NSF is calling research integrity. Yes.
Okay. Next question is, if an IRB application has been designated as exempt at a legacy campus, will that designation be accepted by CT State? And the continuation of that question is, for ongoing grants, is there a process in place for transferring IRB's process at the legacy campus to CT State IRB?
So yes and yes. So the hope is that that information is showing up on this document that we have assembled from the 12 local IRBs, and I would hope that again, if not, if it's something as hypothetically fallen through the cracks, we'd be happy to revisit that if it was something that was approved pre-merger, pre-consolidation.
Okay. We did get a response from Moira Adams, who had said, I just popped it into the chat. It sounds like she knew quite a bit about the subject, just saying that the NSF requirements are in addition to human subjects. Normally, campuses work with outside companies to provide training to individual researchers. Next question is, could these slides be sent prior to the posting of the video? I will be asking Dave and Sohair for the slides, and they will be posted with the webinar shortly, so probably within a day or two. And I imagine, I don't know, if someone had very urgent need of the slideshow, they could probably contact you too.
Absolutely.
And I have one more question here. Where will funding come from for student researchers to complete the NIH training?
So I mentioned that the HHS website has a free human research protection training. And if the students or any applicant goes through that training, we will accept it.
Okay. And sorry, I just saw that one more just came in that's pretty lengthy. So let me just pop it over. Okay. So this person says they are a full-time faculty member and co-advisor of Quinebaug Valley's chapter of Academic Honor Society, Phi Theta Kappa. We want to send a survey to all QV students about their knowledge and opinion of cosplay and whether they participate in cosplay. This is part of our research for our annual's Honors in Action project, which this year has to do with how play in general leads to creative activity. Responses would be anonymous, but the information gathered would be included in the write-up of our project, which we are required to submit to PTK in order to complete the project. No one outside of PTK would have access to this report. Assuming this is something for which we would need to apply to IRB, we'd like to send out the survey as soon as possible, since we must first complete research and then devise an action plan. And all of this must be completed by mid-December. Is there any way to get an expedited review?
Yeah, we'd be happy to work with you on that particular case.
Please send us an email directly to the CT's IRB link that we showed you earlier. We'd be happy to. I think we've already heard reference to this already in another arena. So.
All right, and I see one more. For research course blanket approval, what if some students may want to present in a student poster session at a regional conference?
So we can, we're going to evaluate each application case by case, but in general, if the information is being presented in aggregate form where no respondents or human research participants can be identified, there is some leeway. But again, we would have to look at the specifics of that application and that research study. How sensitive is it, or how non or benign is it? We would evaluate it case by case.
Okay. We've got another one. If we plan to develop a survey for internal purposes, but then decide in the future it would be a suitable topic for a research presentation or a publication outside CT State, when should one begin the IRB application process? And is there anything important to know before submitting?
I would recommend that you go to our webpage. It's better to have the conversation with us in advance. And we'd be happy to advise you on that particular research study.
Okay, and it looks like we have one last question. If the study approved by a local IRB is still ongoing and needs renewal this fall, will the CT State paperwork need to be completed, or will there be a different process?
So if I heard correctly, is it that they had a pending application with a legacy IRB?
Let's see, it says if a study approved by local, it sounds like it's an ongoing process and will need to be renewed. So will the
Yes.
CT State paperwork need to be completed, or is there a different process or something that needs renewal?
Currently, we only have one application that we're asking everyone to complete. So until we develop further documentation for the CT State IRB, everyone is recommended to complete the CT State IRB application.
Okay, and then, sorry, one last one came in. Are these rules universal for all students, including faculty for all, let's see, for all students, faculty, and for all CSCU students, including grad students?
Yeah, these are pretty universal rules. I mean,
Okay.
as you heard from the presentation, the federal regulations are pretty prescriptive, and that's what we're going to use as the general guidelines to make determinations on each application. And we'd be happy to provide you advice and recommendations. Like, you can reach out to us whether coming to the IRB is suitable in your case.
Okay, and that's it. So thank you very much for all that information. And I will be, as I said, this webinar has been recorded. We'll get it up on ctstate.edu/webinar within a day or two, along with the slide deck. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Alexa. Thanks, everyone. We look forward to working with all of you.
All right.
Likewise.
Have a good day.